Hey everyone, and welcome to this episode where I'm co-hosting with Coach Michael. How are you?
Good, thanks. Doing great.
Very, very cool. So we are going to, this is pretty cool. This is the first time we're answering like a specific question from someone with trouble sleeping together here. So let's just jump right into it. And I'll do my standard disclaimer. Nothing here is medical advice to anyone, just me and Mike just sharing some thoughts about what might be helpful for someone out there. And that happens to be Cara. So there's actually two emails that I'll read from Cara here, and then we'll talk about this. So the first one came in 2 days ago, and she wrote the following. Hi, Daniel. I watched many of your videos for a while, and I finally decided to send you an email after something you mentioned in your latest video. I've suffered from insomnia for a year and finished a CBT course. My sleep has not improved, and I believe it could be due to the sleep effort involved in carrying out CBTi techniques. Do you suggest not trying to implement them? I've tried implementing them with a set it and forget it mentality, but I still feel trapped in a vicious cycle of poor sleep in which I average about 4 to 5 hours a night. And just for anyone out there, as well as you, Mike, I had a similar question that I replied to, and my reply was focused on like how there are some problems, I think, with the very kind of rigid traditional CBTi techniques. And then Cara said, thank you for advice mentioned in today's Ask Daniel video. I agree that the rules associated with CBTi seem to work against me. When I was implementing a short sleep window, I felt extremely pressured to sleep during that time. And this pressure to sleep is what started my insomnia. I think by practicing CBTi techniques, I'm often tracking and monitoring for the results, which only increases sleep effort and reduces time spent asleep. I think a more relaxed approach with a less short sleep window is something that would work better to reduce the arousal I still feel while practicing CBTi techniques. Do you have any advice for sleep maintenance insomnia? I've improved my ability to go to sleep most nights, but continue to struggle with returning to sleep once awoken. The traditional CBTi method of stimulus control hasn't worked in this regard. I acknowledge that stimulus control is not meant to induce sleep, but rather to refocus the brain, but I'm still struggling with returning to sleep. So you have kind of like this kind of two components here. There is the first thing I think we should discuss is like, are there some problems with kind of traditional kind of rigid CBTi? And then talk about the sleep maintenance insomnia as a second one. So you may have seen from Twitter and my YouTube channels, etc., that I lately come to think of some things that are problematic with CBTi, and I think this was very, this is why we got this question. But all that said, Michael, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think, when I look at CBTi and a sleep coach, a coach, think of a coach. A coach applies effective techniques, helps someone learn them, and guides them. But everybody's different. That's the bottom line. Everybody's different. If you're coaching someone how to play baseball, every kid's different. If it's like a little league, it's like one kid sort of likes to be told directly what to do. Another kid, it's like, well, maybe try this in this way. And, any parent knows that's kind of true across the board, I guess, with kids. But what I'm saying is, textbook CBI, I like to call CBTi, it's not set up exactly for everyone. So some people have heard about the term sleep compression, instead of sleep restriction, which I lean a little more towards. But I mean, as a coach, I see people across the board. I sometimes it's just like straight to the point. Like, here's your sleep window. Do this, give them like 3 things. Do this, and do this. And then we'll talk more. Some people, it's like maybe they've learned more about it. They've read about it. They kind of are thinking more about things. So you can't be strict like that. You have to be kind of like, phrasing things like, well, as this tends to happen when you do this. And as people tend to do this when this happens. So again, it's all about being a coach in general. So I'm kind of getting like off your original question a little bit, but I guess your original question was, does textbook CBTi work for everyone? I guess the answer is sort of yes and no in a way. But as a coach, you have to be willing to learn about your client and talk to them, find out kind of where they come from, and offer suggestions that work for them. A little bit of a tailored approach, I think, helps. And that's just kind of my take initially on what you were saying.
No, that was great, because I think, you know, we all go into these phases of thinking, and now I'm in this phase of thinking that there's a real problem with traditional CBTi. But then on the flip side of that, yeah, there are a lot of people who probably do really well with like this super kind of rigid approach. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think that's very true. But
Mm-hmm.
to, like, let's say, going back to Cara's question here, do you find yourself that it could be, you know, that there could be a kind of that spending less time in bed could actually become a sleep effort?
Yeah, I understand the question, and I would say yes, it can. I think, you know, as you know, I'm a huge proponent of no time at night, zero time, nowhere, anywhere, no idea what time it is. It's dark and you're awake. That's all you need to know. It's dark and you're awake. Then you just say, where am I going to be? In bed or out of bed? What am I going to be doing? You know, trying to force sleep or allowing myself to get sleepy. You know, that's kind of where I think a lot of pressure at night comes from. So when people feel pressured to sleep during their sleep window, they're kind of taking a little bit of the wrong approach mentally. You know, the approach needs to be, this is my opportunity window. So if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. I don't know how long I've been awake. I don't know, you know, I don't know that much temporally about that experience. I think that helps. And so, yeah, I think someone can feel pressured by given a strict sleep window, especially if it's a much shorter duration than what they have been doing on their own. So let's say someone's been spending, you know, 10 hours for sleep every night. And then you say, okay, well, you know, you say you've been sleeping 4 hours, so we're going to go for 5 hours of a window. That's half the amount of time. Just the thought of that, I can see where that anxiety would come from, even though there's like pretty good, you know, factual, you know, physiology behind why that might be a logical thing to do. It's kind of just, it might not be, again, for a person, it's not for everyone, right? For some people, it might be like, okay, you know, you say you're sleeping 4.5 hours, and a little side note there, it's chances are it's probably like a little more than that if they have, you know, chronic insomnia. But you might kind of ease into it, more of the sleep compression. Like, okay, let's stabilize the morning, and then let's like have you stay up a little later, and just, you know, do that for a week. But then as a coach, you have to understand, like for some people that can be frustrating because they don't feel like they're improving at all. So it's almost like a balance, I guess is the best way to say it. Like you're balancing, like not triggering too much anxiety just from the instructions themselves, and the patient, the client, whoever you're working with, like experiencing something positive. It's like this balance, right? You know, if you just full blown went full textbook CBTi, 5 hours in bed, do it for a week, then we'll talk. If their anxiety is through the roof, it's going to be the worst week ever. You're not going to accomplish anything. But if you can say, well, how about let's go to like 7 hours of time in bed, you know, that window, sleep window. And then let's, you know, and if their anxiety stays down, you know, it's kind of like the brake and the gas thing. It's like, you know, if their anxiety stays down, then, you know, if maybe they can make a little bit of progress, you know, they notice a little bit, like they're a little more relaxed about sleep. They're not quite as worked up. It's like, that's progress. So I guess that's how I would answer that question about, yeah, I think it can become an effort.
Yeah, totally. I agree with everything you said. And I think one thing that I know, you know, we talked about this before, it was since the first time we met, which was like a year and a half ago, something that always struck me with the kind of your approach, Mike, was that you have this kind of like, you know, everything is very subjective. You should absolutely not check the time, and very much actually different from a lot of like kind of the rigid CBTi, where somebody is like, you're going to have 6 hours in bed, and we're going to calculate your sleep efficiency to the dot, and you're going to track how long you fell asleep, how many minutes you were awake, how many times you woke up, et cetera, which then makes me think that have you also felt that approach is better, the kind of more fluid one?
I guess more times than not, I would say yes, I do that. You know, like in general, math makes people anxious. So when you start talking about sleep efficiency and number of times of this and all that, it's like that in and of itself, you can in some people you can kind of see it. So there's sort of like, oh, I'm being measured, and this kind of thing. And it's not for everyone, but again, some people it's like you get right to the point. You're just like, let's do it. Here's your window. Track this, this, and this. Let's talk to you in a week.
Totally. Yeah,
So,
it makes perfect sense. And let me see, before we move to the other part of this email, I want to make sure I didn't miss something. I think we definitely talked about all these, that rules can definitely work against you, feeling pressure. We talked about this. So yeah, I think we kind of covered the first part of this email. So let's go to the second one, which is, do you have any advice for sleep maintenance insomnia? I've improved my ability to go to sleep most nights, but continue to struggle with return to sleep once awoken. And the traditional, yeah, this is also like, I know you know a lot about this, bed sleep association, that's your class and our course, etc. But let me start this one by kind of pointing out some things that I thought about when I read this, which was the first thing I think when I read this is, oftentimes we get questions like, I have sleep maintenance insomnia, or I have just sleep onset insomnia, or I have paradoxical insomnia, or I have this. And it's sometimes I think it is helpful to kind of categorize so you can discuss with somebody. But on the flip side, I think it's very important to know that it's all the same. Right? It all really comes from the same place. Insomnia is always caused by hyperarousal. And that's important, I think, for you to know, Cara, anybody out there to know that if you start thinking of your insomnia as like unique and special and different from that of other people, that is not helpful for you, because then it seems like a bigger problem, a unique problem that requires a unique and special kind of treatment that you may be looking for, etc. So if you can think of sleep maintenance insomnia, yes, for me, the kind of hyperarousal, the emotions that are underlying my trouble sleeping are really the same ones as that person who has trouble falling asleep, or the other person has this thing. It's really all the same. That will help you feel more relieved. It demystifies. Nothing is strange, That is really helpful to you. So that's the first thing I thought of there. And now getting more practical here. Okay, let's say you fall asleep pretty easily, good, no problems there. But then you wake up and then you don't fall asleep for a while. Then my thoughts there are the following: that it's important to know that the waking up part is normal. We all wake up multiple times. But what happens is, if you have trouble sleeping, you wake up and then you become aware of it, and you identify it as a problem, and then you don't fall back asleep. So don't try to fight the waking up. Don't try to go like, I have to stop myself from waking up. That's normal. It is the reaction to waking up that you should focus on. How do you do that? Now I'm going to actually borrow from Michael. Michael taught me this. Coach Mike taught me this, that the first thing I tell people to do is just stay in bed, try to take a mental journey, think of something pleasant. If that happens to you, great, you can stay. But and I say, the time, like, people are like, should I leave my bed or should I stay in bed? To me, I answer that by saying, what you want to avoid is not being in bed. What you want to avoid is being frustrated in bed, being angry in bed, being annoyed in bed. So if you can even read a book in bed or do something in bed and you feel good in bed, it's fine. But if it doesn't happen, then leave the bed and do something. And here's the thing: don't do something that is like boring to make yourself sleep. Then you're fighting it again. You're fighting sleep. Never helps. Do something that's either neutral, like clean this area of the house or something, or something, at least like a book that you enjoy. Because when you get to a point where you're not afraid of waking up, and when you actually kind of like, I look forward to waking up because I can do this thing, then you're really on the right track. So those are my thoughts on that one. What do you say, Mike?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when you first started, you were talking about someone who feels like their insomnia is very unique. And that's something any sleep coach hears, frequently. A client will start describing things and like kind of phrasing them like, okay, well, we need to address this because this is probably different. And this is, this happens to me. Well, one of my most common observations is that my clients are unique, their insomnia is not. And for some clients, I just flat out tell them that. I go, you're a unique person. You've done some interesting things. And you're like, your insomnia is not unique at all. So I just kind of get that out in the open. Not to like insult them or in any way. It's more like, just like, let's be really factual here, so then you described a person, if someone wakes up and they're in bed, exactly. The key is not to focus on or become too aware that you're awake. So I'd like to just encourage people to go to do the imagery, self-guided imagery. So you don't really have to move around much. I'm getting real specific here, but like, if you wake up, you don't even have to really open your eyes if you don't want to. I mean, you can kind of just take your mind somewhere and just go visually somewhere, a great memory, a vacation or whatever. And then as I, like to suggest, if that gets difficult to do, that's usually a sign that you're frustrated. You're just kind of tossing and turning and, that you're trying to sleep. You're trying to initiate it. And that's rule number one with CBTIs. You can't force sleep. Sleep, it just can't be forced. No one can. So then I would suggest doing, and this is sometimes based on their mobility, like either, go out to another room and do something you enjoy. If that's tricky for whatever reason, don't want to wake up a house member, the dogs are real crazy, whatever, maybe sit in a chair by your bed. If that's not possible, not enough room or whatever, they live in a small space, maybe just sit up in bed. So it's kind of like different degrees of not being flat, eyes closed, lights off, trying to sleep, quote unquote, trying to sleep. So you work with it again, like a coach, you work with your client to find what can they do? Like what's their situation? And if I do like to point out that if the experience during the night is waking up and being awake for a long time, and then kind of going back to sleep, and then a lot of people describe kind of like the last couple hours of the night as their best sleep. I fall asleep at like 5 a.m, and then my alarm goes off at 6:30, and I was sleeping so well. If it's that kind of experience, like they're awake for a while and then they fall back to sleep, that's definitely something for stimulus control. That's definitely where you want to like recognize if the imagery is difficult, recognize that and do something else. Like try to catch it kind of quickly. Whereas, and this as a doctor, if someone's describing waking up frequently, they fall asleep for a while and then these brief awakenings happen over and over and over and over again, that can be a sign of a sleep disorder. That's a discussion with the doctor. That's, if I hear that, that's red flag. I'm like, I might follow it up with like, oh, and you snore, huh? Okay. Oh, and you have your mouth's kind of dried out. And okay, these are classic like sleep apnea signs. I go, call your doctor. Let's go straight to your doctor. You gotta talk about that, because if you can't breathe very well at night, the CBTi things help, but they're going to be blunted. And so you have to take care of any breathing issues during them. And that's a classic sign. So that's something that comes to my mind when I hear that. And the second, kind of in a similar vein, ask a doctor about medications. If they're taking anything that maybe is causing this fragmented sleep at night. Again, CBTi techniques are going to be kind of blunted. So those are a couple doctor questions that I try to identify and then guide the client there. Like, let's get on the phone with your doctor, talk about that. But if it's the waking up for a while, becoming aware, getting frustrated, trying to force sleep, that long extended kind of awakening, yeah, let's weaken that association of the bed and wake, and then strengthen it. So how do you do that? Classical conditioning, Pavlov 101. It's you leave the conditioned stimulus, which is the bed. You leave that environment and go somewhere else until true sleepiness happens, and then you're back in your bed. So that separation during a time of heightened alertness is classical conditioning. And I like to point out to my clients that this isn't a one night thing. This isn't like you're gonna get out of bed one night and go read for a while, then you climb back in bed and maybe fall asleep for that. That doesn't mean like this isn't gonna happen again. Try to give a long-term kind of outlook on this, but definitely it's the same kind of idea of associating the bed with sleep as if someone was having trouble falling asleep at the start of the night. You don't stay in bed for long stretches of time struggling to sleep. That's really kind of the core element of it.
How about this one? I realized this is a question I've gotten a couple of times, and I realized I don't have like for almost every question I have like a pretty much a standard like a go-to answer, if you will.
Yeah.
But this one was somebody asked the other day and said, "Okay, what I'm doing now is if I don't fall asleep, then I get out of bed." But my husband is saying, "Well, you're just training yourself. You're conditioning yourself to get up, and that's going to be a problem for you." And what do you think of that one?
So like at the start of the night, you're talking
Yeah, yeah,
about?
pretty much that one. Yeah. Or
I,
I think it could also be, and I think, to be honest with, to give you a little more meat here, I think the problem with this one comes from that kind of like, again, the cut and dry CBTi textbook thing where
yeah.
it says, if you've been in bed for more than 50 minutes, get up. And a lot of people take that literally. And so they're like, it's been 50 minutes, now I get up. And then the question becomes like, could you condition yourself to like not sleep because you're kind of expecting to get up again or something of that nature?
Yeah, I would just say, research on CBTI doesn't show that happens, right? I mean, there's no like scientific evidence that oh yeah, that's what happens. It's again classical conditioning. Some people will say they don't want to get out of bed because they feel like it wakes them up. Hear that a lot. Any coach does. And it can be a bit of a tough question because it's like, I could see that, like, I get it. But what I try to do is get them to recognize that, well, is staying in bed working? You always have that to fall back on. You're talking to me, kind of assumes that it's not working. So, maybe it's leaving the bed, but you're like sitting out in an ice cold living room, like just like shivering. Or maybe you feel like you have to bore yourself back to sleep. That's a common one, as you mentioned before. So maybe you dread getting out of bed. Oh, I don't want to get back to. This person told me to read the dictionary, and I'm just like, oh, I can't. That kind of thing. Enjoy the time out of bed. It's peaceful. It's calm. It's quiet. You have to turn the tables on the whole thing to really make it work. But that phrase of, yeah, I don't want to get out of bed because I feel like it's, it will wake me up more. Like, and that question of, will it train you to become more awake? If you get out of bed, is that like a conditioned response? Well, no, the conditioned response has already happened. You're already awake. You're just warm and comfortable, right? So, the bed, warm and comfortable. It's like, I'm the first person to say, I don't want to get out of bed, but if you can help someone see the logic that, this common experience has to be like detached from the bed, it's like bedroom environment, sleep, calm, peaceful, sleep. You're not calm and peaceful, frustrated, tossing and turning, readjusting the pillow for the 14th time, that kind of thing. Catch it early, go find something else that you like to do. Have a couple options, like this gets like really simple stuff, like make some tea before you go to bed, put it in a thermos and it's waiting for you. Have a book you like and maybe another book you're thinking about and maybe a crossword puzzle, multiple options. So you just like slide right into that environment, stay warm, and you just peacefully enjoy the time until sleepiness gets strong again. Never a check of the clock. That's kind of, that'd be my answer, a long answer to that question.
And a good one too, and that's super important for Cara here or anybody else. That I think it's also super important that if you're in bed and you're like, should I get out of bed? Should I not? And if I get out of bed, what should I do? Maybe that's not good. Like it's good to have a plan. Like it's gonna happen. You have a plan. Go to that. That's perfect. And
yeah,
I just want to add one last thing here, which is. I think when people tell me that, I'm afraid I'm going to become awake when I get out of bed, then I say, the real problem here is that you fear losing sleep. That is what's driving your insomnia. So when you get out of bed, despite you fearing that, and do something you enjoy, what you're doing is you're teaching your brain you have nothing to be afraid of. Don't worry. And it's kind of like that is an act of kind of like calming your brain down and not and
right,
working on that fear.
Right. And then overall with that whole stimulus control thing going on is a reduced sleep opportunity window. So night after night, the drive is going to build. The physiological homeostatic sleep drive, it gradually builds and builds and builds. So you know, it's not just like every night is the same. You have to kind of, it helps to let your client know that there's other things going on too that you've talked about, you know,
Yeah.
the stable morning, the reduced opportunity, all these things are playing behind the scenes. We're just talking about the exact moment that wakefulness happens during the night.
And I think that's super important too, to think of sleep drive as something, it's something that kind of passively happens when you're awake, and then also have this approach of like, I might sleep much better tonight, or maybe I don't, like that's great, as opposed to, and again, going back to where we started, I think with a lot of cut and dry, you know, textbook CBTi, it's like, you got to stay awake for 20 hours, no, 19 hours to build a strong sleep drive so you can sleep. Then it's not working. But if you have this kind of, it happens passively, then that works great. So
yeah.
All right, so cool. So Cara, I hope this was really helpful to you, and I just want to say thank you for submitting this question, and me and Coach Michael will do this weekly now, answering a question or maybe a couple of questions together.
Yeah.
And I want to say, for anyone out there that is considering becoming a coach themselves, if you got to a point where you sleep pretty good and maybe you want to take that step of helping others, go to the sleepcoachschool.com and check out our free webinar. And for anyone out there that, you know, is learning a lot from this channel, but maybe needs a little bit more accountability, maybe a little bit more support, maybe kind of a guided pathway towards sleeping well, also go to the sleepcoachschool.com and check out our self-coaching free webinar for a course, or a program rather, that's going to start on June 1st. And this is not up on the website yet, but there's going to be another offering too, which is going to be a phone call with, guess whom, Coach Michael, where you can talk to him over the phone about whatever you feel is best for you. So any concluding remarks?
No, it all sounds great. Great question. Thanks, Cara. I appreciate it. And you're not alone, right? That is what you described. It's yes, we understand what you're saying, and we know where you're coming from, and there's definitely some solutions there, for sure.
Totally. All right. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next week.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Okay.